Hello, and welcome back to Bumblebee. Today we'll be diving into the top 10 scandalous ancient emperors that you've never heard of. And if you have heard of them before, pretend you didn't, because I promise this is worth it. Alright, so number 10 is Xia Jie. This emperor's rule is highly disputed, but it's speculated to have been from 1728 BC to 1675 BC. There's no conclusive archaeological evidence that confirms that this first dynasty in traditional Chinese history, Xia, even existed. This includes no written records about Xia during the Shang dynasty, which would have supposedly been the dynasty that replaced it. But that doesn't dissuade the belief it existed, and how its final emperor was a tyrant. He was reported to be emotionally and physically cruel, intolerant of criticism, and full of bloodlust. He was also quite the self-indulger, obsessed with intercourse, luxury, art, and entertainment. And by the way, entertainment ranged from his dancing concubines to literal torture of his subjects. Xia has an expansive list of crimes and abusive behavior. Sometimes he rode his advisors like horses, forcing them to crawl on hand and knee. He constructed a lake of wine and had it filled with nude swimmers, both female and male, for his favorite consort. He also enjoyed sentencing people to slow slicings or beheadings just for criticizing him. His outlandish behavior was his undoing. The kingdom of Shang, alongside other kingdom sects, came for Xi, and after many battles, he and his empire was defeated in place of the Shang dynasty. Number 9 is Sui Yang Dui. His reign from 604 AD to 618 AD, and he's remembered as the second emperor of a short-lived Sui dynasty. He appears in many Chinese literatures that feature terrible Chinese emperors for his wasteful projects and endless crimes. Even historians believe him to be the worst of the emperors. See, good old Sui directly caused the death of millions of Chinese commoners and bankrupted the treasury. For example, his reconstruction of the Great Wall of China resulted in the death of 6 million workers. Another is while his troops succeeded in conquering Champa in what's now southern Vietnam, thousands of Sui soldiers died from malaria due to the unpreparedness. But one of the most famous examples remains how a mere slight caused him to order an invasion into a Korean kingdom. It was terribly mismanaged as he was the one overseeing it and had no experience, and it resulted in hundreds of thousands of Sui soldiers dying from famine or elements. His rampant impulsivity ultimately brought revolts through China, and in 618 the despised emperor was killed by his own top general in a coup, and the Zhou dynasty was then replaced by the Tang dynasty. Number 8 is hubris of King Zhou of Shang. It would be his downfall, ultimately. In a feudal society of forced servitude, it's no wonder that they managed to conquer surrounding barbarian clans. They had an elite army and a strong civil obedience. This is because Zhou is cold and has no compassion. He, like our first, also enjoyed wine pools and gluttony. He's remembered for running through prime ministers as well. The first one offered the emperor his daughter. Apparently, she didn't put out enough, so the emperor had her killed and her father made into sauce, quite literally. The next prime minister got the human jerky treatment because he was outraged by the emperor's decision. He should have kept his mouth shut because, as I said, it got him killed too. The third, however, is remembered for his virtue and also his tactic. He made it out alive by satiating the wily emperor with gifts of animals, treasures, and concubines. These gifts kept him distracted long enough for said prime minister to center rebellion and dispose of the tyrant. Ming Shengzhong is number 7. He ruled from 1572 AD to 1620 AD, if you even want to call it a rulership. See, Ming blatantly shirked any and all wanly emperor duties at any opportunity. In fact, he spent 20 of his 48-year reign away from the royal courts, essentially on strike for half the time he was on the throne. His absence contributed to the already crumbling Ming dynasty and ultimately furthered the decline as he had left it to corrupt advisors. Instead, he spent much time supervising the construction of his underground mausoleum, where he even had nightly parties, ceremonies, and group intercourse before its completion. I'm not going to disregard in his early years as emperor, he was a great leader. He was diligent and capable, repelling various foreign invasions. Some believe that's why years later they were so self-indulgent and disregarding of the public. The man's industrial action was due to his disenchantment with court politics, particularly how he denied his choice of successor. Regardless, his blatant disregard ensured that the occupation of China by the Manchus in 1644 AD, and some historians go as far as to state that it was not the final 2 Ming emperors, but Ming Shenzong who should be responsible for the stunning defeat. Number 6, let's meet Emperor Anko, who wanted to keep it in the family while keeping family out. This Japanese emperor was not a usual heir. See, his older brother was supposed to take the throne after their father passed in 453. Unfortunately, his older brother had a romantic scandal. He was doing his half-sister. His royal court, unlike ones elsewhere around the world, was not for royal siblings getting down. So his younger brother, who would become Emperor Anko, battled his brother and exiled him when he won. After taking the throne from incestuous big bro, Emperor Anko built a succession of violence and reigned with an iron fist. But like I said, they were keeping it in the family. Anko sent a messenger to his uncle proposing a marriage for his younger brother. While his uncle agreed to the idea, the messenger chose to spice things up and just lie to Anko that his uncle had rejected the offer. Anko, notorious for his blind rage and kill first ask questions later attitude, did exactly that. He had his soldiers capture and kill his uncle and then bring his captured aunt back to the kingdom, where he made her his wife and empress. Now stepfather to his nephew, Anko was right to be nervous that the boy might want revenge. Ironically, whilst he was laying in his wife empress's lap, the child ran up with a sword and stabbed him to death. More family drama. Number 5 is Sun Hao. His grandfather was the founder of the Three Kingdoms period. As the 4th and last emperor of Eastern Wu, he reigned from 264 to 280, and it's his rampant stupidity and atrocious behavior that destructed Eastern Wu and ended his grandfather's Three Kingdoms period. Before his death in captivity at the hands of Emperor Wu of Jin, Sun is remembered for his incapability of handling state affairs, let alone to lead. He was extravagant, cruel, and vindictive in his suspicions. Like many other emperors, he wasn't bad at first. He took measures to reduce tax, release concubines from holders, and regulate spoiled royals and aristocracy. Unfortunately, it doesn't last, and this emperor becomes a drunkard, hussy tyrant, killing faithful advisors, concubines, or really anyone that upset him. He didn't really care for the emperor role anymore and shifted his focus to intercourse and torture. Some of his wildest actions were to order the major officials' daughters not to marry anyone before he decided if they were beautiful enough to belong to him as a concubine. He'd have people thrown into rivers or faces and eyes peeled away when he was mad. He forced people to join him in his alcoholism. Officials who didn't drink at feasts were penalized or even beheaded. He once did exactly that with a red-hot saw to an official who had punished one of the emperor's concubines because he caught her stealing. Number 4 is Toghon Temur, aka Emperor Shang. He ruled from 1333 to 1367, and he was the 11th and last emperor of the Yuan dynasty. He earned the throne in 1333 at the age of 13, which does kind of explain the young emperor's proclivities. Emperor Shang was obsessed with sexuality of any kind. He actually went out of his way to study intercourse and the skills he could learn for it. He had a grand stage built for nude dancing performances day and night. Outside of his intercourse obsession, Toghon advocated national discrimination and oppression towards the Han people, even ordering the execution of people with surnames such as Zhang, Wang, Liu, Li, and Zhao. Naturally, political struggles in the court were abundant. The corrupted imperial envoys he dispatched looted from local officials, who in turn imposed heavy taxes on the people. By 1340s, this nightmare expanded to include droughts, high inflations, and famines. There were oppressions on dam workers of the Yellow River, and it caused peasant uprisings. In 1367, the emperor saw troops capture the capital city Dad, which today is Beijing, and he fled to Yingchang, where he died from diarrhea in 1370. He cut the limbs of this family tree. Emperor Tenmu is number 3. It starts with Emperor Tenji's death. Beloved by all in Japan, it surprised many when his brother refused to succeed him when he died in 672. Tenji's son, now Emperor Koban, became the successor, and while it feels like a smooth power transition, it's all part of a ruse that would be remembered as a succession crisis, the Jinshin disturbance. Tenji's brother Oama moved the imperial capital to a shrine in Yoshino. He claimed that he was going to be living as a monk, but he actually plotted a rebellion against his nephew. He allied himself with provincial leaders who had resented Tenji for centralizing the government control, and they launched an attack on Emperor Koban. The fight was short-lived. Uncle Oama obliterated the imperial army and the capital. Koban, young and terrified, makes the decision to take his life rather than be defeated. And so his uncle becomes Emperor Tenmu. He then punked his original allies in the siege by centralizing the government's control even more onto himself and his empire. Love can make you crazy. Number 2 is Zhou You Wang. Little is actually known about him except the scandalous love story I'll be telling momentarily. He was the 12th ruler of the Western Zhou dynasty and reigned from 781 to 771 BC. In 779 BC, a consort named Baosi arrived to the palace, and Zhou was completely head over heels in love with the woman. He immediately replaced his empress with her and bestowed her every treasure she could ever desire. What seemingly made her so intoxicating was her melancholic nature. She was passive, monotoned, and intelligent. She would never laugh or smile. No matter what he did or offered, she just never cracked. He even set a prize of 2,000 gold pounds to anyone that could, but no one could make her laugh. A minister teased that maybe the emperor should light the fire tower's warning beacons that signaled to the entirety of China that invaders were coming. A proverbial pull the fire alarm. Well, that's exactly what he did. The entirety of the empire is panicking, believing barbarians are coming to kill them all. At the sight of the armies frantically rushing to the aid of the capital, the moody Bio-C finally broke into a hint of a smile. I'm sure you can imagine how pissed the nobility and the army of the entire kingdom was when they realized that they'd gathered their men and traveled for literally nothing. They would have forgiven the emperor had he not done this with another few times afterwards. This caused a boy who cried wolf story, and no one came to the capital's aid when barbarians did attack a few years later. The story of the love-stricken emperor who toyed with military matters for the sake of a smile then became an enduring Chinese allegory on responsibility and sensibility. And number 1 is Emperor Jiajing. We talked about him in our Spoiled Kings video, so you may remember the story. During the Ming Dynasty, Zhou You became the Jiajing emperor. Since he wasn't brought up royal, he didn't care for the throne and visibly shirked the duties and left decisions to corrupt grand secretaries, who by the way sold government positions to people for cash. He was busy hanging out in isolation and chose to go even farther than the previous emperors by hiding out specifically in the Forbidden City. Obsessed with divination, alchemy, and longevity, his primary goal was to achieve immortality, which he sought out through the use of all sorts of concoctions. One was red lead, and its key ingredient was virginal menstrual blood. Jiajing kept hundreds of young girls, feeding them only rainwater and mulberry leaves to ensure their purity. Girls who became ill were punished for it, as was anyone who denied him. 21 years and hundreds of girls abused and killed. 16 fed-up concubines planned an assassination. His favorite concubine laid the trap, and as he was falling asleep beside her in bed, the other 15 girls burst in, held him down, and tied a ribbon around his neck. But the slip knot stuck, and it gave one concubine enough time to lose her nerve and run to snitch to the Empress. Empress Fang has soldiers round up the girls, and while the Emperor is still unconscious, has them all executed in a 3-day process of slow slicing torture. In addition to the girls being killed, Empress Fang ordered 10 of their family members beheaded and 20 other family members enslaved. This whole scandal became known as the Palace Plot of Ray Yin Year, or the Palace Women's Uprising. In 1567, after 45 years on the throne, the Jiajing Emperor dies at 59 years old of mercury poisoning from one of his elixirs. That's the second longest reign during the Ming Dynasty, which ended by drinking menstrual blood. Thank you so much for watching once again. I've been your host Teresa. I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below what you thought, and if you want more content like this video, and be sure to subscribe to keep up with Bumblebee's regular uploads.